Good evening. So we're just starting chapter 3 of the Katha Upanishad. So verse 1 is the individual self and the cosmic self enjoy the fruits of actions, residing in the cave of the intellect, which is the best place for self-realization. Those who know Brahman say that the individual self and the cosmic self are related to each other like light and shade. Those who, as householders, worship the 5 fires and have thrice performed the Nachiketa sacrifice also say the same thing. So Brahman has manifested itself as this universe, and it is, in a way, its creator. This is, of course, figurative. Brahman as such is never involved in any kind of activity. But Brahman is both the cosmic self and the individual self. As the individual self, it has many roles to fill. It acts and it enjoys the fruits of its actions. But this process is possible only because the cosmic self is behind it. The cosmic self and the individual self are always together. They are like light and shade. The cosmic self never acts, but because of this close relationship, it looks as if it were acting. This is only an appearance. The appearance is merely an empirical truth, but not a reality. It is in the empirical sense that both the cosmic self and the individual self seem to be acting, as well as enjoying the fruits of their actions. They are one and the same, but empirically separate. Ritam means truth, but it also means an infallible law. Here the word is used to mean fruits of actions. If you act, the fruits of your actions are bound to follow. This is why the word ritam is used to mean fruits of actions. Sukritsa, of good work, it also means the work done by oneself. Any work done by divine will is good. It produces joy. The Creator creates out of joy, and the result of such creation is also joy. If a person does anything as an instrument of God, the result is good. It produces joy for himself and for others. But if he acts independent of God, the result may be bad for himself and for others. When the individual self acts, it would do well to remember that it is really the cosmic self. This will save it from having attachment to the fruits of what it is doing. This is the right attitude for the individual self to maintain regarding work. Parame, superior, the space in the heart is considered superior to the space in any other part of the body or outside. For it is in this space that the highest spiritual realization takes place. Paradre is the space through the heart where Brahman is realized. Literally, it means the better part of the body. So the two, the individual self and the cosmic self, are combined together and appear to be engaging in action and in the enjoyment of action. Although in truth, the Brahman, the cosmic self, it never actually acts and never actually enjoys the action. And this is a basic idea that you find in the Upanishads and the Vedas, is that our real self, our true self, is one with the divine universal Brahman and the universal self, but they appear to be separate. In our experience, they appear to be separate. Basically, as long as our sense of identity is based upon our individual existence, then we have our individual experience. We go through life, we do things, we experience the results of our actions, and as jiva, as the individual soul, we go from life to life to life to many, many different lives, many different experiences. But yet all the time, our real self, our true self, is one with Brahman, with the consciousness out of which the whole universe has come into expression. And in order to understand this, you have to appreciate what they teach in Jnana Yoga, is that as a human being, we are consciousness that's connected with a particular body and a particular mind, a particular personality, particular thoughts, understandings, feelings, and so forth. But basically, we have the sense that I'm this person, I'm this individual here. And what we are as that individual person is consciousness connected with body, mind, and so forth, with various instruments. And that gives us our sense of individuality. But if we can go back further enough, if we can follow the path of neti, not this, or vichara, self-inquiry, just who am I? If we really begin to explore the question of who am I really, then eventually you get back to the realization that what you are is pure consciousness, which has nothing to do with the body, with the mind, and with the ego, which says, oh, okay, I'm this separate individual here. It is just the consciousness. And as we mentioned previously, we quoted Swami Varadananda. When a person attains that experience, when he goes beyond body, he goes beyond mind, he discovers that he's consciousness. He's a point of pure spiritual consciousness, but he finds it's part of a vast, infinite spiritual consciousness. And then he said, when you come back from that experience, you realize that the consciousness, which you experienced there in your samadhi, in your deep meditation, that consciousness, that same consciousness, is the consciousness of everybody. And so now your sense that, okay, I'm just this particular person here, and I'm cut off from everybody else. I'm cut off from the rest of the universe. I'm just this particular person here, and all I know is what this particular person experiences. Instead of that, you're now beginning to realize that you're one with all that exists. The one, that consciousness, which is the real you, the real self, that is the self in all beings. And this is what basically spiritual life is, or the spiritual journey is trying to get back into the awareness of that true self. So it says here, the idea that Brahman has manifested itself as the universe is only figurative. And in truth, as I say, Brahman never actually becomes the universe, never actually becomes involved in action or creation or anything else. But it seems to be. And we think, okay, Brahman is like the ocean, and we're all the individuals, we're all like waves in the ocean. But a kind of more accurate description, civilly used by Shankara, is that really we as individuals are like a pot of water which is reflecting the sun. And you have all kinds of different pots of water, some very small, some big, some and so forth, all giving a reflection of the sun. But in truth, none of those reflections is the sun itself. The sun itself is completely different. It's not at all become the reflection. It's like you look at yourself in the mirror. And you're not the reflection. You're not what you see in the mirror. You're here, you're there. And in fact, you're not even the body that appears in the mirror. You're a consciousness which is aware of what's going on and which you don't see, which you can't perceive. And so like that, Brahman is there, and because Brahman is there, the whole universe, whole creation comes into existence, but he doesn't actually do it. Now, normally in action, we think in terms of action, that, okay, I want to create something. A painter wants to create a painting. So he paints. He gets his oils and his brushes and canvas, and he creates a painting. Through his action, the painting was created. Now, as we mentioned previously, that when you think of creation, you have to get a different concept of creation. Instead of God saying, okay, I'm going to put this planet here, and I'm going to put that planet there, and we'll do this, and kind of building the planets out of something, is more like the mental creation that you find in the novelist, the writer who's creating a book. He creates a book full of characters, full of action, full of all kinds of activity and plot and things going on. But those characters, that whole world, he lives only in his own mind, his own consciousness. As soon as he stops thinking about that world, it disappears. Now, if the characters in that book, if they were conscious, and they began to ask, who made me? They could examine every person, everything, every object in their world, and they'll never find who made them. But all the time, the consciousness, which has made them and which is sustaining them and which is keeping this world alive, the imagination of the writer, that consciousness is always there. It's there within it. They're contained within it. They're not separate from it, but they can't see it. When they look outside and see the other people and objects, they don't find anything there that is their creator. But yet all the time, they're contained within their creator. And so Brahman, or Hiranyagarbha, what they call cosmic mind, is as a creator. It is like that mind of the poet, of the writer. It's creating this whole universe in its mind, in its consciousness, and then it takes shape. At our level, it takes shape as a physical, gross, material universe, which they call Virat. But beyond that is the cosmic mind, Hiranyagarbha, which gives shape to what takes place here. So, when they speak of God as creator, normally most religion or most religious people, they tend to think God permanently, well, he created the universe. But actually, he's not the creator. Creation, the creator is related to a particular activity that someone does. And like we've used example before, you say somebody's a teacher. And it means he teaches. He goes to school, he teaches, he writes things on the blackboard, gives tests and all that, and he teaches. But at night, he goes home and he just sits around. Well, Brahman is God just sitting around. He's not creating a universe, he's not doing anything, not making anything happen, he's just sitting at home being himself. When he gets engaged in the creation, that same consciousness, then the whole universe comes out. But it's not what he is, and he's not kind of changed or limited or any way kind of defined by that universe. And so, like that, Brahman is there. Because Brahman is there, everything happens. Everything happens. But Brahman is not actually doing it. He's not actually saying, okay, I'll make this person here, I'll make that person there. He's actually totally not involved in it. Once Swami Varadananda, he went to a college, gave a lecture, and there were a lot of philosophers there, philosophy teachers and things. And they asked him, well, what is Brahman's kind of relationship to this universe? And Swami Varadananda told him, he said, Brahman is not aware of the universe. And that just completely blew their mind. They couldn't get that, but that's what it is. It's like when a person is actually in Brahman consciousness, he's not aware of the universe. It's like, and this is what spiritual kind of realization ultimately means, is like you wake up from a dream. And when you wake up, where's the dream? And this is what they say in philosophy, is that when you're in the dream, when you're in Maya, when you're in this world, you can't figure it out. But as soon as you're out of the dream's not there, so there's nothing left to figure out. And that's why they say certain questions you can't really answer. Because either you're in a place where you can't figure out what the answer is, or you're in a place where the question doesn't even exist. So like that, there's this very kind of mystical, very difficult to grasp relationship between Brahman and the universe. And this is good, fine for jnanis, for philosophers, for intellectuals who like this type of thinking, but it's very difficult for the average person to really grasp, and even if they accept it, it actually is very difficult for them to really relate to it. But now there's a different way of relating to this truth, of uncovering this truth. And it says that any work done by divine will is good. It produces joy. The Creator creates out of joy, and the result of such creation is also joy. If a person does anything as an instrument of God, the result is good. It produces joy for himself and for others. But if he acts independent of God, the result may be bad for himself and for others also. So it would, when the individual self acts, it would do well to remember that it is really the cosmic self. This will save it from having attachment to the fruits of what it is doing. And this is the right attitude for the individual self to maintain regarding work. So we just give this kind of high metaphysical philosophy idea of, Brahman is really not in the universe at all. But from our individual standpoint, like I said, that's very difficult to grasp, and it's very difficult to really get enthused about or to appreciate. But when you realize that God, the divine source out of which the universe has come, which is all love, all wisdom, all power, everything, that reality is within you, and that you can actually get in touch with it, then it starts to matter. And this is where you have the Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. You have the Karma Yoga, the path of action. Now it mentions here that the Creator, He creates out of joy. Any work done by divine will is good, and it produces joy. And the Creator creates out of joy. And the result of such creation is also joy. In Zen Buddhism, one of the most famous koans that they use, as you know, in Zen Buddhism, there's two basic schools of Zen. One where they focus on their breathing primarily as a meditation practice, but the other one is where they give the student a koan, and it's like a riddle that doesn't make any sense to the ordinary mind. But once you attain realization of this higher consciousness, then all of a sudden, oh yes, now it makes sense. So one of the most well-known of these koans, most common of the koans, is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And that's it. That's what's going on here. But we see this world as a whole lot of separate little individuals, each one kind of going through their experiences, not realizing that all these individuals, including us, we've come out of this great joy, this great creative joy. And it's clapping. The Lord, who's omnipotent, who's totally unlimited in terms of, out of joy, He creates this universe, and the one, He becomes many. And then He plays with Himself. He fights, and he struggles, and then He loves, and He does all these things. But it's really the one great joy that's expressing itself. It's like a wonderful drama going on. And they call it sometimes the Leela of the Lord. So out of that great joy, all of this has come. But the problem is, the more we become individualized, the more we become kind of limited to our individual self, the less we can appreciate that infinite joy and love which is behind the universe, which is the source of the universe, and which is the source of us and our own true nature. And normally, when we look at the world, and we see, oh, things are not the way I want them, I'm not very happy, and so we struggle, trying to change the world, trying to make things better, so that we can be a little happier, a little more prosperous, a little more successful. And like that, we're always kind of battling with the world and trying to make it shape up into what we want. But the whole message of the kind of mystics, the spiritual people, is that within you you have this tremendous, wonderful reality that can provide everything you want, everything you need, and bring with it also great joy. See, as we look out at the world, we may think, oh, if I had $1 million, then I'd be really happy. Or if I had a BMW, then I'd be happy. I like that we look out, and we find often that even if we succeed in getting what we want, we're still not happy. We're still not satisfied. That's because the ego is in charge. The individual is in charge of our personal desires. This is what's driving us. I want this, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to grab this. When we can make some small connection with the divine within, then it's like you've connected with this wonderful divine power, and now it flows through you, and what comes to you now is coming out of the will of God, kind of. Not your personal desires, your personal understandings and things. It's now all your experiences are being drawn to you by this kind of wonderful, all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful presence within. And then, both inside, in meditation, when you become aware, somewhat conscious in communion with this reality, you're filled with peace, you're filled with joy, and happiness, and kind of a tremendous sense of everything's fine, everything's good. When you come out of that meditation, then you're now in a world that's manifesting as a result of kind of that divine grace. And this is what you realize. Things do not come through our own effort and struggle and so forth. They automatically come through grace if we can connect with that grace. And this thing, we have to connect with it. Often, most people think that grace is kind of an arbitrary thing. You have a problem, so you pray to God, and hopefully He'll come and He'll solve your problem for you, or He'll sit up in heaven and say, "Okay, I'll fix him." So that's good. Other times He said, "Oh, that's a bad person. I'll swat him." And like that, we think of God, as a kind of personal, arbitrary kind of approach to things. But actually, Sri Ramakrishna said, that the breeze of God's grace is always blowing, but you have to unfurl the sail. In other words, the way to get God's grace is not to go to Him and say, "Oh, bring this and fix this and do this." Is to somehow connect with it, somehow realize His presence. Then that grace begins to flow. And then you see suddenly everything is working the way it's meant to work. And this is everything, all of life, both inside and also outside, everything gets transformed. Everything starts to get filled with this divine reality. And then as a person begins to experience it, then he's drawn more and more to that reality, and then all these kind of high levels of merging and Brahman and things, they come. They can come just naturally and spontaneously once the person has gotten kind of a taste of it. Once the person is as Sri Ramakrishna said, we're all like magnets, or we're all like iron filings, and God is like a great magnet. But where the iron filings, when they're covered with dirt and rust and things, they don't feel the pull of the magnet, and so they just sit there. But when they get cleaned, then they feel the pull of the magnet, it will start to draw them. And we see in the lives of the saints and mystics how intensely they yearn for God. In Ramakrishna's life, how intensely he yearned for God, because he had a sense of what God was, of what's there. But most of us are so covered by our ignorance that we're simply not aware, and we just go through life without even thinking about it in most cases. So the idea is that even though you've got this high philosophy of Advaita and Brahman and things behind it, that is from where we stand now, it's possible to start to make some connection with it. And then, as soon as you start to get even a little of that connection, then it starts to draw you more and more. And this is then you see, this is where you find true fulfillment for your life. You can satisfy all your desires, get everything you think you wanted, and still feel, something's missing and something's lacking. But as soon as you get anything, any kind of connection with God, then comes a sense of fulfillment. This is what I've been seeking. This is what I've been looking for. And so, I like that. Our problem, our fundamental problem, is that we create a sense of being separate from God, of being something different from God, of God being off somewhere else, and we're here. In truth, we're always with God, because there's only God in existence, but we can put that barrier, and then we say, okay, God is there, and I'm here. But as you remove that barrier, then you find everything unfolding, not just in terms of having a happy, prosperous life, but in terms of actually becoming part of the infinite, eternal, all-powerful Creator. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say that it's very difficult to get beyond this sense of individuality, beyond this sense of ego. He said, it's like the scum on a pond, that you clear it away, but then pretty soon it comes back. And he said that occasionally in meditation or in a moment, you may get a glimpse of something higher than your personal kind of life and existence. But then there are all thoughts and attitudes and feelings, they all come back in and kind of cover it up again. But he said, in the meantime, though, what you can do, what we need to do, is to transform the unripe ego into the ripe ego. And he said the unripe ego is one that says, oh, I'm so important, I'm so good, I have so much money, I have this and that. That personal ego saying, oh yes, I can do this and I'll do that, and I'll accomplish this, and like that. He said, transform that unripe ego into the ripe ego, which says, oh, I'm the child of God, I'm the instrument of God, I'm just His servant. Now that ripe ego, it represents transforming our sense of identity from the small individual personal self, made up of the body and the mind and feelings. So transforming our identity from that to something higher than that, something better than that, and then begins the process of transformation until gradually the consciousness actually shifts and becomes that higher reality, becomes one with it. And as the person's on that path, moving in that direction, then everything starts to fall into place, and gradually the whole of his divinity unfolds. In truth, it's always there, it's always completely there, completely intact, it can never be lost, it can never be destroyed. Nothing that we do or nothing that happens in the world can ever take that away, because it's the reality of things. But we can appear to lose it. And this is where all the kind of trouble comes. In London, Swami Varadananda, he was talking about evolution. Back in those days, about the time the Dharma was just a few years, so evolution was kind of a big thing back then. And he was saying how evolution really is not an evolution of bodies going from older body, evolving into a higher organism. He said it's really an evolution of consciousness. But he said, though, that we, the individual self, or the real self is already perfect. It doesn't have to change, it doesn't have to get better, it doesn't have to improve anyway. But he said what happens is that it's nature, prakriti. This is what's changing, and as it changes, it gradually reveals more of the perfection that's already there. And he said, he told the audience, suppose there's a screen between me and you. Look, I can't see anything at all. I don't even know you're there. And then suppose you poke a hole in the screen. He said, now I look and I can see, oh, there's somebody there. I can see maybe one person there. Then the hole gets a little bigger, and now you see more. And eventually, the hole gets so big that you can see the whole audience. And he said, really, this is what is going on in this universe. He said souls, they take on a body, and maybe this particular body is just got a total barrier from the light, not aware of anything. But then maybe that light, somebody manages to poke a little hole, and now it starts to get a little bit of the light. And gradually, as it moves, more and more the light begins to come, more and more of the reality of things begins to be revealed as it moves through higher and higher bodies. And then finally, the barriers, the screens is removed altogether. And then there's only the one divine reality. So this is what kind of is going on. The self exists within us, consciousness exists within us, both as the individual self and as the divine cosmic self, which are ultimately one and the same, but temporarily now there's this separation. So verse 2 says, to those who wish to cross over the ocean of worldly experience through sacrifices, the Nachiketa fire stands out as a fine bridge. We know of this fire, and we can also perform it. And we also know of the way that takes you to the other shore, where you become one with Para-Brahman, or Brahman without attributes, and you attain fearlessness. So those who are inclined towards ritualistic worship can use the Nachiketa fire as their bridge across the ocean of worldly experiences. Through it, they eventually go to heaven, where they become one with Virat and hold an important position, such as that of Yama. But these people do not fully enjoy this position. They get tired of it after a while, and they struggle to become completely immersed in Brahman. Sooner or later, they succeed, and that is what is called liberation. There's another group of people who do not like this roundabout way of getting liberation. They do not want to waste time going to heaven, for there's nothing in heaven or elsewhere that attracts them. They want to attain self-knowledge right away. When they die, they completely merge into Brahman. That is a state where there's only oneness. Since there is no duality, they have nothing to be afraid of. They therefore go beyond fear. They see only one self everywhere. So this group meditates on Para-Brahman, Brahman without attributes. The former group meditates on Apara-Brahman, Brahman with attributes. So the Nachiketa fire sacrifice, as you remember, this was the second boon that Nachiketa got from Yama about how to perform the particular sacrifice which would take a person to heaven. And so he taught him the Nachiketa fire sacrifice. And so some people can approach God through rituals, through worship, and so forth, and eventually, attain high positions. In Hindu mythology, most of the gods and goddesses and all this, they are like souls, like us, but they've attained a very high level of development, of spiritual development, so they get a high position, and they're like bureaucrats, and the heavenly bureaucrat, and they become powers of nature, and so forth, like Yama, the god of death. But it's a position. Yama is a position. A particular soul occupies it for some time, and then his term is over, and another soul may come and become Yama, and that previous Yama, well, he may have to be born again, or he may go on to other spiritual realms. But ultimately, though, the person, as he goes higher and higher, he eventually becomes one with Brahman, becomes completely united with Brahman. And in that, there's no duality. There's no universe outside there. There's only the one pure Brahman. And so then he goes beyond all fear, beyond all struggle or anything else. And then other people, they just want to go straight to Brahman. They don't want to, they want to attain straight union with God, and they don't want to go through all these heavens and everything else. I think there's a well-known saint in India called Baba Ramdas. He was getting visions of God, but he would complain, that these visions, they come and go. I don't want this, I want union with you. And in Saint John of the Cross, who was one of the classic mystics, great saints in Catholicism, in his book, Dark Night of the Soul, explain how in meditation, in prayer and in meditation, God was sending him constellations. He was sending like wonderful experiences, very blissful experiences. He said he kept fighting them. He said, no, I don't want these experiences, I want you. And this is the ultimate kind of where a person eventually goes. Is really all these experiences that come and go, they're even very, very high, wonderful experience, still, they're not God, they're not the reality. And so that yearning comes as a person reaches a certain stage that I just want God himself. I don't want, all the kind of show. I don't want to be a God in heaven. I don't want to be this or that. I just want to be with God. And so that leads to oneness with Brahman, where there's no longer isolated, separate individual saying, oh, okay, I'm over here and I'm seeking God. Now it just becomes God. So then verse 3 says, Consider the embodied soul as a master of the chariot, the body as a chariot, the intellect is a charioteer, and the mind is a reins. And so this analogy of the chariot and the reins, so this is, you also find in the Bhagavad Gita and other places. So it says, a fine analogy is introduced here to explain the relationship between the individual self, the mind, the intellect, and the body. The self is apparently doing nothing, but its presence is enough to make the body, the mind, and the intellect work. None of these are independent. They work according to the wishes of the self. The self here is the jiva, the individual self. In the long run, it is the same as the cosmic self, but until it is able to shake off Maya's hold, it has many limitations. The individual self is free, but somehow or other, it imagines that it is not free, that it is in bondage. And to get rid of this delusion, it has to make a tremendous effort. So just as you can drive your vehicle to either a good place or a bad place, so also you can use your body either to attain liberation or to get further entangled in the world. The entire matter is in your hands. The driver, the intellect, is the key factor. If the intellect is alert, you will never get into trouble. So each individual is an aggregate of the 5 organs of action: the hands, the feet, the tongue, and the organs of procreation and evacuation. And the 5 organs of perception: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the sense, and the tongue. Besides these, there are the 4 inner organs: the mind, the intellect, the heart, and the eye consciousness. The mind is characterized by doubt and indeterminacy, while the intellect is determinative. The heart is the storehouse of past impressions, and the eye consciousness gives the embodied self the impetus to work. The intellect, however, is the mainstay. So this is a classic example, similarly in Hinduism, that the soul is the master of the chariot, the body is the chariot, the intellect the charioteer, and the mind is the reins, and the senses are the horses. So just like in the chariot, if the horses are out of control, then the person tends to get into trouble. It's like in the old westerns, the runaway stagecoach, the screaming lady inside and going off the cliff. Like that, we are alive. And this applies to many, many people. Like that, when we don't have control over things, we don't have control of the senses, we don't have control over our feelings and desires, many people just kind of crash through life, through all kinds of unpleasant and unhappy experiences, because they don't have any idea of how to steer or how to drive the chariot. And it's like you get in your car and you just take off, but you don't have any idea how to steer it or stop it, and so eventually you don't get to where you want to go. On the other hand, if the horses are trained, if the charioteer is capable and in charge, then the chariot is a wonderful vehicle to take the person to wherever he wants to go. And this is the idea, is that until our body, our, the senses, the mind, the intellect, all these things, until they're kind of under control and working together harmoniously, then we're not functioning properly. And a lot of people in life are not functioning properly. And we ourselves, we find time and time again that we just feel, I could have done better on this, I really made a mistake, or we know I'm better than this. But we find ourselves doing things anyway that tend to cause harm to us and harm to other people. You know, my brother, he was in the Navy, he was a corpsman, and later on he became a physician's assistant one time. Now he's like a registered nurse. But for some time he worked in a prison in Virginia, near Richmond. And he said, well, one of the things about these people in the prison is that they have the emotional control of 6-year-olds. They get angry, so they hit somebody, or they hurt somebody, and or they see something, and so they try to grab it. And he said, that's the biggest problem. How they end up in prison is they just have no a sense of control. And he said the other thing is they have usually a tremendous sense of ego. And so between the two, they end up in jail. And so like that, when we don't have control over our emotions, over our desires, and things like that, then we tend to get into lots of trouble, go through lots of experiences that are very unhappy, and may basically kind of wreck our lives. But on the other hand, when a person's got everything under control, then the life is a wonderful experience. Then the journey of life becomes a very joyful kind of unfolding of things. But the importance is to be able to get your instruments. That's what they are. The body by itself is inert. It's just an object. It can't do anything unless the kind of higher self tells it to do something. It tells it to move, and so the hand moves. But the body by itself, if, for example, you're unconscious, the mind is not functioning, and so on, the body's not going to do anything. So it's not the body's fault, although the body feels, the senses feel attractions towards things, but then there's a higher level of our being, the mind, which should be in control of that. And now the mind, what they call manas, kind of lower level of the mind, this is the part of the mind where we deal with impressions and reactions and things like that. And it's kind of in a state of flux. It's changed all the time. One day we feel like doing this, next day we feel like doing that, and like that. Our mind is always changing. Beyond the manas, kind of lower mind, which kind of filters all these impressions, and there's the intellect. And it's the intellect is what they call the determinative faculty, meaning it's the one that can say, no, this is the truth, or this is what I should do, or this is the right thing to do. Now we've all had the experience that our mind, our intellect saying, yes, this is what I should do, but the body and the emotions, everything else, say, no, I want to do this over here. And this is, particularly when a person starts out in religious life or spiritual life, there's usually this conflict goes on. One part is saying, yes, this is what I want to do, this is what I know I should do. The other part is saying, no, but I want to do this over here. And then that battle kind of goes on. It's something called the battle between the flesh and the spirit. The battle between what you know with your higher self and what you really want with your higher self, and just the reactions that are there in the body. So early stages of spiritual life is largely getting the mind, the senses, the mind, all this, getting them back under your control. So that instead of them dictating to you, like the runaway horses, instead of them taking you wherever they want to take you, you can now kind of sit firm and say, no, this is what we're going to do here. And this is the value of like discipline and practice and things like that, is gradually these instruments, which are supposed to be instruments, which are supposed to be under your kind of control, gradually they come back under your control, and then instead of making problems for you and everybody else, they now start to become your useful vehicle. And this is what kind of the struggle is. And it is a big struggle in the beginning. It is very difficult. As anybody knows who tried to meditate, we compared it in our classes on meditation. We compared it like the bucking bronc. That the wild horse is very fast and very strong and powerful, but it's kind of uncontrolled. But then the old West, the cowboys, they would catch the wild horse, and then they'd try to put a saddle on it, and they'd try to ride it. And the cowboy would get the horse's back, and the horse would buck up and down, and eventually throw the rider off. So that the rider would have to get back on, again the horse would throw him off, until finally the horse would get tired of it, stop fighting him, and say, okay, you can sit there. Now that horse, with all its strength, all its power and everything, that horse is now a very good vehicle. Back before cars, this is what people used. And so now it's become a very useful instrument. Whereas before, it had power, it had ability, but it didn't have, it wasn't of any use to you. So this is what meditation is like in the early stages, is that you're trying to focus the mind, you're trying to get into meditation, and the mind is running this way, it's running that way, and you're continually struggling. It goes off this way, so you have to kind of bring it back and center it again, and like that slowly. As you do this so slowly, the mind stops fighting you so much, and then it begins to become under your control, and actually then becomes helpful, becomes useful. And so this is what we have, these instruments, body, mind, so forth. Beyond, the one that's using them is the self, and are the consciousness. And when we're aware that we're the self, when we're centered in the self, then all these things, they'll come under our kind of control. But in the beginning, when we're identified, and this is the big problem, is that we identify with the body. And then we say, oh, I am the body. And then whatever the body kind of wants to do, feels like doing, we will tend to do that. Or we identify with the mind. And whatever the mind desires, whatever it feels like, that we'll tend to do. And I like that, because when we identify with body, mind, they control us. They dominate us. And we've used the example before, when we say, I'm angry, then it's very difficult. We can control the anger. And we can, through the discipline, so we can control the anger, not express it, but still it's very upsetting for us. It's very difficult. It kind of throws us off balance. But if instead of saying, I'm angry, we say, okay, there's anger in the mind and I'm just watching it, then our relationship to the anger is no longer, I'm that anger, and therefore it's making me do what it wants. It's now, okay, I'm scientifically just kind of observing, okay, there's anger there. Now it's there, but it's not you anymore. And so it's not forcing you or kind of driving you into action. It's just something, a state of mind, and after some time it goes away. And this is gradually shifting back to detaching from the reactions that go on, gradually begins to free yourself, make you aware of who you really are. And as you become gradually aware of who you are, then you develop a proper relationship between yourself and body, mind, and all these experiences. There's now a proper relationship where the chariot is going where the self wants it to go. Instead of the chariot dragging the self here and there and going through all kinds of mud and everything else, it's now the chariot is taking the passenger, the self, where it wants to go. So wise people describe the senses as horses and the body as the chariot. Objects, sounds, forms, etc. are like roads for the horses. The self, together with the body, mind, and senses, is the enjoyer. So if the body is a chariot, it has to have horses to pull it along. The senses are the horses. The comparison is apt because as the horses are restless, The senses are also restless. Both are hard to control. The senses are easily attracted by things regardless of whether they're good or bad. They are incapable of judging good from bad. But the mind can judge good from bad, and it is the mind that can control the senses. Just as the horses move along roads, so also do the senses run from one object to another. The question is, who is the doer? Who is the agent of all that the body does? Is it the body, the mind, or the senses? The answer is, it is the self, associated with body, mind, and senses, who is the doer, the agent. This self is known as the jiva. It is also known as the individual self. The real self is the supreme self, which is pure consciousness. This supreme self, under the influence of Maya, assumes the various attributes and becomes an individual self. The attributes can be removed by spiritual disciplines. The mind creates those attributes, and again the mind destroys them. If the mind is properly trained, the illusion that creates the division between the supreme self and the individual self disappears. The mind is responsible for both bondage and liberation. So in truth, we're never separated from the supreme self, but the mind creates the sense that we are. And this is where our problems come. The more we focus on the individual self, the more we are absorbed in what the individual self is gaining. In other words, the more we follow the path of prayas, so the pleasant, the more we're getting kind of caught up in that illusion that I'm this human being. I'm this very limited, finite human being. But as we learn to back off of that, as we begin to follow the path of Shreyas, the good, then we're starting to get back to it, and then realizing that, okay, I'm not this, I'm not that. So as we do this, the world, the limitations of the world, of the body and mind, these become less and less dominant in our experience, and more we're starting to operate and exist from our own kind of true self. And as we'll find as we do this, once we begin to eliminate the barriers, the problems created by the mind, the fears and the anxieties and the likes and dislikes and all these kind of things that go on in the mind, once those are all quieted down and the mind becomes calm, we start to feel a sense of ourself, not as our everyday life person, our everyday mind, everyday body, we start to get a sense of ourself as something kind of else, as something sort of calm and centered and spontaneously, naturally, something that's kind of good and loving, gradually. It's peaceful, it's at peace, it's calm, it's kind of steady, and it's just naturally then starts to be a little more loving, because it's a little more happy. So this is kind of the real state that we want to do. And as you do this, you get into see, right now we're filled with our mind. We're filled with the mind in all the kinds of things we want to do, in all of our worries, and all of our concerns, and all of our different kind of self-images and things like that. When all that quiets down, then you begin to find this, okay, I'm peace. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to force anything to happen. I don't have any stress. I'm just kind of at peace. You know, back when they were building all the temple and things up at Ganges, you know, the guys there, they were working very hard, you know, doing construction and all. And so Swami Varadananda, he used to take us on a camping trip for like 2 weeks. We would go up, we'd take canoes, and we'd go up to the boundary waters, up at the top of Minnesota and border with Canada. There's just 1,000 lakes there. And it was the first time in my life that I'd ever actually been totally out in the woods. I mean, after the first day or so, you'd take your canoes, you'd paddle across the lake, and then you'd portage for the next lake, you'd paddle. After the first day or so, you wouldn't see anybody all day long. Normally, you go and you're like at a park, but there's trucks going by and things like that. But this, you're totally out of the woods. And the thing that struck me is that when you get out like that, out in solitude, then the whole sense of, oh, I got to do this, all your to-do list, everything, all this, oh, I got to do this, all that drops down. And you just start, you're in kind of this timeless time sort of thing, where you're just existing without the turmoil that's actually going on in the mind all the time. And then you get into this very peaceful, just kind of natural state. And so, like that, in solitude, certain times a person may experience this, but usually our mind is continually churned up, continually in turmoil over all kinds of things we think we have to do, things we have to haven't accomplished, things we're worried about, and all like that. We're always kind of in a kind of a hurricane of things going on in the mind. But when all that calms down, then you start first of all to get calm and peaceful and feeling okay, and then things gradually just start to transform within you. And they say, mystics, they all say that a true mystical experience, when you actually get to spiritual consciousness, there's no time and there's no space. And there's nothing to do, nowhere to go. Everything is perfect already, but the mind, but that comes when the mind gets completely kind of stilled, or at least out of the way. When you get to something deeper than mind, then you begin to realize that. That's why they speak of peace so much. We don't know. Most people, we don't have any idea what actual peace is like. Peace means usually a little lack of conflict or lack of disturbance or something, but the real peace, as called in the Bible, the peace which passes understanding, this is something that unfolds from within. So we'll cover one more verse, verse 5. So if the intellect is incapable of discriminating between right and wrong, and is also connected with an uncontrolled mind, it is like a charioteer who has to deal with uncontrollable vicious horses. So if a person cannot judge right from wrong, he is at the mercy of his impulses. He may then do things he should not do, things that are obviously wrong and are more likely than not to do him harm. If on top of this he has an uncontrolled mind, his misery will be endless. He will be like a charioteer who himself is silly and ignorant, and has in addition to deal with very wicked and uncontrollable horses. So the emphasis here is on your judgment as well as your ability to control your mind. Woe to you if you lack in both. So sometimes we have the intellect which knows, okay, this is what I should do. If that intellect is not functioning rightly, then we don't know what to do. And this is one problem that we face as human beings, is that we don't know. We don't know what the truth is. We get opinions out of books, we get opinions from other teachers or other people, things like that. And for some time we may believe a certain thing, but then we change, we say, no, that's not right, this is right. So when we really stop to look at things, we realize that actually we don't know what's going on. And it's there that most of your great scientists, the ones who really would be the first ones to say, I don't know anything. It's the junior scientists. They say, oh yeah, I know all about it. But the really advanced ones, they eventually say, that you really don't know. If you look deeply, you really have to say, I don't know what actually the truth is, what God actually wants. But it's there. The possibility of knowing that is there, but it's not going to be found in your reason or your logic or your kind of everyday mind. It's kind of deeper within. And this is, in particularly Christians, I suppose Hindu bhaktis too, maybe, but in Christianity, where the main focus is on devotion, on trying to serve God, many sincere people, they want to know, well, how do I know the will of God? What am I supposed to do? And this, particularly when you're like in college, and you're wondering, what am I supposed to do with my life? It's a great quandary, because you really don't know, and you feel you want to serve God, you want to do the right thing, but you don't know what it is. So attaining that depth of knowledge where all the knowledge is there, but it just takes connection. And this is what your meditation, and you're going within gradually, as you unfold deeper layers of consciousness, then you're starting to get connected with that. So on the one hand, you have the intellect, which doesn't know what it's supposed to do, but in most cases, it doesn't get us in too much trouble. I know we have a basic sense of right and wrong, I think. But then also, even if your intellect knows, okay, this is the right thing to do, you have the senses and the mind and the desires and the emotions and all these things saying, but I want to do this. And in fact, most people, they use a reason primarily to justify what they want to do. You know, if you want to do something, you'll come up with 100 reasons to do it. If you change your mind and say, no, I don't want to do that, well, now you've got 100 reasons why you shouldn't do it. And so, like that, the main purpose of logic in so is to support what we feel like doing. And so like that, this is kind of normal life, but you're trying to go into something kind of higher, bigger. So if you don't have any control, any understanding through your intellect, and at the same time, you don't have any control over your emotions, desires, and reactions and things, then you tend to get into trouble. So any questions there?
You start with the self, the individual self, and the distinction between individual self and the cosmic self. You said cosmic self is nature we do not know. Then how can I connect myself with the thing which I don't know?
When you, the example we use before is how normally we know things through mind and intellect, and that is like looking in a mirror. And we used the example before how if a mirror is completely covered with dirt, you won't see anything at all in it. And so you start trying to purify it. You start trying to clean it. And this is what your spiritual practice and things are doing. You're removing all kind of the dirt and the obstacles, and gradually you start to see something in the mirror. And the more the cleaner gets, the more clearly you begin to see the kind of light in the mirror. At some point, then comes the kind of shift where you realize, oh, I'm not the mirror, I'm the kind of witness of the mirror. I'm the consciousness here. You know, it comes for a devotee. It comes that as he develops love for God, he just wants to be closer and closer to God. And at some point, his personal self is forgotten, and he just then merges into God, becomes one with God. You know, it comes. The realization comes in a moment of self-forgetfulness. When we forget ourselves, when we forget our personality, we forget our kind of personal identity and so forth, then this shift comes. We go, that's not me, you know, this is it. But it comes in self-forgetfulness. As long as the ego is there, driving whatever's happening, including driving your meditation practice, whatever, then the personal self is there. And you go on and you get better or get worse. Your mirror gets cleaner or gets dirtier. But eventually, at some point, it comes a point where you kind of just shift. You let go of that self, and then the real self can reveal itself. And I think it was last week or so that in the commentary he mentioned how knowledge of Brahman comes in a flash. In other words, suddenly you go from being a mind, struggling, meditating, trying to do something, and suddenly there's just transformation. It's the difference between being asleep and being awake. Yeah, at some point you're asleep, but then you're starting to wake up, and when your spiritual life and spiritual learnings are there, it's like you're starting to wake up. But then all of a sudden you wake up. Okay, now you're awake. Now you're there. The personal self was actually existed in the dream, you know, and so now it's not there anymore. But the real self of who you are is actually there, and you realize, oh, you know, that all of that I thought before, that was actually just kind of an illusion or a dream, and this is who I am. Now, the important thing is, for the ordinary person, This sounds like death. To say that, okay, this personal individual that I am, Sa, is not there, and now I'm gone, what's good of that? But in fact, it's like releasing yourself from something that actually isn't you at all, and becoming aware of what you sort of really are. And so this is a transition that takes place. And in deep samadhi, in deep kind of inner experience, the world does this. You're not aware of the world, you're not aware of your daily life, anything else. But it seems that after you've had this experience, you come back. You can come back again into the awareness. Oh, the world is here, I'm here, you know, Dr. Bachi is here, and so on. But now, you know that, okay, Dr. Bachi is here, everything's here, but I'm not there. I'm here. I'm aware of it, I'm conscious of it, but I'm not it. And this we use just often an example how the out-of-body experiences. You know, person's on the upper knee, he looks down, he sees the body's there. Now, up to that point, his sense of, oh, this is me, resided in that body. But now, he's in a different state of consciousness, where the thing that's saying, this is me, it's here, up around the ceiling, he looks down, and he sees that body just as an object, like a piece of furniture. It's got no connection with him at all. But previously, he was in the body, and his whole sense of, this is me, you know, this is what I am, was based on that body. And any threat to the body, any thought, you know, dying would frighten a person terribly. Oh, I'm not going to exist. But actually, his self, his true self, will always exist, and it's just, it becomes identified with different things. And so, what you're trained to do is when you, somehow or another, when you stop identifying with the body, with the particular individual, human being, then suddenly you find, oh, I'm here. I'm fully conscious. I'm the me. The real me is here. But now I know that experience is not me. It's an experience. It's there. I'm aware of it, but it's not what I am. And then you begin to become aware of much kind of vaster types of consciousness until eventually a person goes all the way back to becoming one with Brahman, where there's no duality at all, where you realize there's no separation between me and God, and that Brahman, which you become one, is the source of the whole universe. Everything is calm. You know, so it's kind of very highly experienced.
In one place, by Swami Premananda, he has mentioned that when you connect yourself with the cosmic self, two things happen.
Yeah.
One is that you begin to feel the presence of God within you. And the second thing is that you begin to see what was invisible to you before.
Exactly. And see, this is everything that happens here in this world is the result of an invisible something that we're not aware of. And this are the causes of whatever's happened, whatever experiences come to us, the cause of those is not here where we see it, but it's there. Ultimately it goes back to the divine consciousness. And that's the real creator, the real source, the real creative force. Now normally we're not aware of why things are happening, what's causing it, and we're just struggling around with kind of the end of things, trying to make a change without no understanding the process. Now when you read about yogis who can do miracles and things like that, it's not miraculous, it's just that they have reached a more subtle level of consciousness where they are functioning, they're aware of the underlying causes behind things, and they can kind of manipulate things from that end. So a person, say, has a disease or sick, and they can perhaps cure that person because they are at this higher level where the cause of the disease, they can kind of change that. But normally in our normal state, we're not aware of any of that. And so all we're seeing is like the end product and the effect. But we don't know what the cause is. But as a person begins to experience the presence of God within, he's also getting connected in touch with the cause of whatever is flowing. Now, when we shut out that higher inner reality, that presence of God, we can shut that out with our ego, and then we don't get the kind of the benefit of God's infinite wisdom and love and things flowing through us. Instead, it's us personally, with our limited understanding, but others trying to accomplish things. Yeah, any other questions? Okay, then tomorrow, Swami Varadananda, he is giving class over at the Hindu temple on India Eternal, about the cultural and religion, everything of India. So that's from 11:30 to 12:30 in, I think it's in the Vivekananda Spiritual Center over at Hindu temple. And so he's doing that first Saturday of each month, mostly. Then on Sunday, he'll pick up again, and this will be on now meditations according to the yoga aphorisms of Patanjali. And that things go on. At the end of the month, last weekend in July, he is going to do the retreat at Ganges on spiritual life, how to be spiritual. And he's replaced Swami Varadananda. Was originally supposed to do that, but then he had to cancel. He's buying a house or something. Anyway, things came up that he had to cancel. So Swami Varadananda is going to do that program. And also on July 20th, he's going to the Kriya Yoga group over here in Joliet, and they've invited him to be part of a panel there. Like that. So things are going. Om Asatoma Sadgamya Tamasoma Jyotirgamya Viturma Amritam Gamya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace,